The edge rusher free agent market is getting really interesting. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Diving into the mailbag coming up in a little bit, but wow. What a difference a day makes. The free agent edge rusher market has gotten really interesting over the course of the last 24 hours, and the Bucs are certainly one of the teams that can benefit from that. So late Wednesday night, the Los Angeles Chargers released Joey Bosa in order to free up around $25 million in cap space. He was the last remaining San Diego Charger. Now everybody on the Chargers has only played for the Chargers since they moved to Los Angeles. But then on Thursday, the Cincinnati Bengals granted Trey Hendrickson's request to seek a trade. That means in the course of 24 hours, they lose Sam Hubbard to retirement, and then they allow Trey Hendrickson to find a trade partner. That's two more big-time edge rushers on the market. And real quick, I have to get this off my chest, and I think it's partly because of where I live, but this is why the Bengals are the Bengals and really just can't win anything. You're sacrificing the NFL's leading sacker over the last 2 years in favor of a receiver that has not played a full season since his rookie year, and that's honestly easily replaceable. It's a lot easier to replace T. Higgins, whether that's in free agency or the draft, than it is to replace Trey Hendrickson. So now they're going to draft a guy and hope that he turns into Hendrickson rather than just paying Hendrickson. So go ahead, Cincinnati. Load up on all those weapons for Joe Burrow. It's not going to matter when your defense is giving up 30 points a game. But anyway, that's my Bengals rant for this show. But here's an updated list of the upper tier edge rushers that are available. Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett via trade. And then free agents include Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Azeez Ojulari, Chase Young, Malcolm Koonce, and Dante Fowler. I guess the Bucs picked the right time to be in the market for an edge rusher. And I know I've talked about Mack over the course of the last couple of episodes this week, but I thought this was interesting. So Red End Zone on Twitter posted this saying, quote, even with missed games, Bosa had a higher sack and hit per snap average than Mack. And if you factor in the averages, would have had a higher snap count if both players played a full season. Injuries were freak accidents. I'd entertain both and be happy with either if I'm Tampa Bay. So let's talk about that for just a minute. One could make the argument that Bosa had more opportunity because he was playing with Mack. And after the season that Mack had in 2023, Bosa was getting better looks and more advantageous matchups. I can't say that for sure unless I go through and watch every single Chargers game from last year, that they both played in, but I don't have time to do that at this exact moment, but it is something worth thinking about. The second thing with Bosa is the injuries. Over the last 3 years, he has dealt with groin, foot, and back injuries. He played in just 28 games over those 3 seasons and finished with 14 sacks over the course of those games. On one hand, That's a half a sack a game, which adds up to 8.5 sacks a season, which I think a lot of Buccaneers fans and the Buccaneers themselves would take right now. On the other hand, he did that while injured. So there is the likelihood that he could be even better if he's healthy. However, the signs are there that his body is starting to break down a little bit. And Bosa even said to reporters last fall that the back injury that he suffered early in the year caused him to barely be able to walk or sleep. Here's the pro versus con argument for Bosa. He is going to be a fraction of the price that Khalil Mack is going to be. The injury history and risk, that's involved in that, are going to play a factor in any contract that he gets. The Bucs could use him rotationally to help manage his snap count and try to keep him as fresh as possible. And if that's the case, he wouldn't be the only one that the Bucs bring in. He also wouldn't be the one that has to carry the load necessarily. Bosa, Diaby, Braswell, whoever they draft, and then another potential free agent, that could be a really effective rotation for Todd Bowles' defense. However, it is high risk. Injuries in each of the last 3 seasons, that tells us it's likely going to happen again. This is not the same thing as the Chris Godwin injuries, where those were catastrophic fluke injuries. These are now, starting to pile up a little bit more from the wear and tear. Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't get hurt this year, but it is an inherent risk if you're going to bring him into the building. It's the same risk as signing Dre Greenlaw, or for that matter, potentially Chris Godwin, based on how the recovery is going. You don't know how they're going to come back from those injuries. So that ends up being built into the price that these teams are going to offer. I had a lot of people reach out to me, whether it was insiders, whether it was people on Facebook, whether it was people in the DMs, saying that they don't want Khalil Mack. They don't want the Bucs to pay that much for an aging player that won't be around for very long. Well, then I would say that Bosa, for those of you that don't want Khalil Mack, Bosa is your guy. You have the chance at double-digit sacks and huge production for much less money for a guy that isn't 30 years old yet. Where Mack is going to get probably $20 to $22 million, Bosa is probably going to end up in that $12 to $15 million range. Probably heavy incentives for games played, percentages of snaps, sacks, takeaways, things like that. You have former Buccaneer Gerald McCoy on Twitter pounding the table for Jason Light to bring in Mack, Bosa, or Hendrickson, as well as Darius Slay. When it comes to Hendrickson, what we know right now is that the Commanders and Falcons are interested, and there are multiple teams monitoring the situation. That comes from Jordan Schultz. At the end of the day, as much as we've talked about it, and although I think the Bucs can certainly make the money work, I'm not sure that Light gives up the picks that it's going to take. Unless he can give up picks this year and next year, probably with the higher pick being the one that he wants to give up next year, I just don't see him unloading a third or half of the picks that the Bucs have in this draft just to bring Trey Hendrickson in. Now, hopefully he doesn't go to Atlanta, but Atlanta is definitely not a team that's a couple of players away from making a Super Bowl run. The Bucs are much closer to that than the Falcons are, so that would be kind of a weird move for them to make, especially when they're still on the hook for Kirk Cousins, who is now the highest paid backup quarterback to ever live. So my final take heading into this weekend is that if the Bucs want to swing for the fences and put it all on the line, you either sign Khalil Mack or you pull the trigger on one of the mega deal trades. If you want to compete this year and have continuity for the next 3 or 4 years, you sign Josh Sweat. If you want a high-risk, high-reward guy for much cheaper than those two players, so you can kind of hedge your bets, you sign Bosa and then an additional player, maybe Marcus Davenport or Kayvon Chason or John Kaminsky, where you pair one of them with Bosa for the same amount or maybe even less than you would spend on Mack or Sweat. And then finally, if you want to try to make that Shaq Barrett type move and see if you can replicate the success you had there by going after the lesser known high potential guy, you go after Azeez Ojulari. So those are kind of the tiers that the Bucs have in terms of what they can do with what's available. Some of you are going to be in the swing for the fences camp, some in the sweat camp, some in the Bosa camp, but there won't be much getting done until the Bucs start clearing out some money. So if they could go ahead and get started on that, that would be great. Something else that's great is some of these mailbag questions. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. The Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 180. The Oklahoma City Thunder are closing the gap at plus 190. And then the Cleveland Cavaliers are storming into the conversation at plus 600. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find the Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Mailbag time to send you into the weekend. The first one rolls in from Ethan, who he actually had two questions. I'm going to save the other one for mock draft Monday, but Ethan decided to depress all of us except for David Harrison, who continuously messages me that Chris Godwin is going to go to the Washington Commanders, despite the fact that they just traded for Deebo Samuel. But Ethan asks, we all want Chris to come back, but in the event that he leaves, who would you look to for a veteran free agent signing? And like I mentioned, he has another question about a draft prospect. I'm going to save that for Monday's episode. But to me, if I have to replace Chris Godwin with a veteran free agent, I mean, obviously that puts the Bucs in a position where they have to draft a guy, which they're probably going to end up doing anyway. But losing Godwin changes the time in which the Bucs would strike. Right now, if you bring back Godwin, you're looking at a receiver on day 3. If you lose Godwin, you might be looking at a receiver on day 2. But signing a veteran, the timing of this is beautiful because I'm going to go with Tyler Lockett. I have always loved watching Tyler Lockett play, and I feel that he is so unbelievably underrated. He's like the Lavonte David of wide receivers. Yes, he's older. He's around the same age as Mike Evans, but we aren't looking for a long-term guy in this particular situation. We're looking for someone that can line up and get close to being able to do the things that Godwin does. He has played every game since 2017 for Seattle. 36 of his 49 receptions last season resulted in a first down. In 2023, 47 of his 79 receptions resulted in a first down. In 2022, 50 of 84. 215 of his 762 snaps last season came in the slot, but he had over 300 snaps in the slot from 2021 through 2023. So I'm not sure if that's something that he would be willing to do more of, but he is incredibly reliable, and it's not an unfamiliar situation for him. He's still pretty freaking fast for an old man, and I say old man in reference to NFL years. Yeah, he's a tested veteran that can be, that other experienced voice with Mike in the room with the other receivers to bring along whoever they draft, as well as help the continued development of Jalen McMillan. Other than Lockett, I don't really see a ton on the market that I would get really excited about in terms of replacing Godwin. Like, it's not going to be Davante Adams. The Bucs are not going to spend the money that it takes to get Lavonte, but then he's also not going to come in and be willing to play second fiddle to Evans, even though Evans is the superior receiver. They aren't going to trade for DK Metcalf. He wants to be one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL. He's not going to play second fiddle to Mike Evans. Stephon Diggs is a head case. I don't want him anywhere near this football team. Mike Williams could be a lot of fun, but he's not filling the Godwin role. Keenan Allen, again, he would be a nice addition, but he's not playing the same position as Chris Godwin. So unless Cooper Kupp gets released instead of traded, and the Bucs can sign him on the cheap because of the money that he's still going to get from LA, I think Lockett is the best fit in the short term. Then I'm strongly considering receiver on day 2 of the draft, depending on how the rest of free agency shakes out. Insider David asks, and not David Harrison, Insider David asks, if you could bring back one player from yesteryear to put on the 2025 Bucs, who would it be? All right, so when I first saw this question, my immediate thought was, oh, that's easy. I'm going to take Simeon Rice. Duh, obviously. Rice in today's NFL as a stand-up edge rusher would be absolutely terrified. But then I started thinking more about this question. And it's like, well, the Bucs need help at linebacker, safety, and corner. So now I can have Lavonte David and Derek Brooks playing next to each other. I could have Antoine Winfield Jr. and John Lynch on the back end of the defense, just ruining other human beings' lives. Or I could have Rondé on the other side of Zion McCollum. So now the question got a lot more difficult once I really started thinking about it. And I think given the current state of the Buccaneers and where their biggest weaknesses were last season, I'm taking Derek Brooks to line up next to Lavonte David. Either one of those guys I would trust to drop into coverage. Either one of those guys I would trust to blitz and get after the quarterback. Either one of those guys I am trusting to stop the run, to spy a mobile quarterback, to take the ball away in a key moment. These are the 2 best linebackers in the history of this franchise, and both of them being the versatile weapons that they are, Todd Bowles would create so many different looks and different disguises for just those 2 guys that it would be an absolute nightmare for any opposing offense to try to figure out and scheme against. So while I thought it was going to be super easy to answer and just say the Bucs need an edge rusher, they have to be able to get, after the quarterback with their natural pass rush without sending all these blitzes, the more I started to dive in and think, how many first downs did the Bucs give up because the linebackers couldn't cover? How many touchdowns did they give up because the linebackers couldn't cover? How many times did they have to pull Lavonte David out of the middle of the field to go after the quarterback and leave KJ Britt or JJ Russell kind of on an island, creating a disadvantage for the Buccaneers defense? So I think if you add Derek Brooks, even if you add Derek Brooks to the 2024 Buccaneers defense, they probably win 2 more games just from that alone. So, as much as I would love to see number 97 standing up and getting after the quarterback in this Todd Bowles scheme, Derek Brooks would make the 2025 Bucs defense just light years better than it already is. Finishing out the mailbag and some contract news that could affect the Buccaneers. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And right before recording, it was announced that Bobby Wagner was returning to the Commanders on a 1-year deal worth up to $9.5 million with $8 million guaranteed. This is important because of how similar Bobby Wagner and Lavonte David are across the board. Age, production, their importance and their value to their respective franchises. So this could be an important deal when it comes to projecting what Lavonte could wind up getting from the Bucs should he return for a 14th season. Now, what I will say is that while he and Wagner have mirrored each other pretty closely, It seems as though Lavonte has taken less money than what he could have gotten on the open market over his last couple of deals compared to what Bobby Wagner has been able to get. So last year, it was a 1 year, $8.5 million fully guaranteed contract. But his deal before that, 1 year, $4.5 million with $3.35 million guaranteed. And then in 2021, he signed a 2-year deal for $25 million with $20 million guaranteed. So he's probably going to be close to that $8 million guaranteed that Wagner just got. But it wouldn't surprise me if, they talk to Lavonte and they say, hey, look, we want you back. We're glad you want to be back, but we're signing Khalil Mack. We are in the process of trying to trade for Trey Hendrickson. We got to try to make this money work. Can you work with us a little bit and bring your price down, somewhat? And he takes a little bit more of a team-friendly deal, a la the Brady era, where a lot of these guys were taking less money to make sure that they had the best possible team around them to go out and compete for a championship. And I think a lot of the players on this team are willing to do that. When you talk about the restructures with Baker, Tristan, Antoine, if you're extending Mike to restructure that a little bit, those guys aren't losing out on anything. That's not a renegotiation. That is a restructuring of the contract to move money around for cap purposes. They're still getting their money. But when you're talking about negotiations, you might see players be a little bit more team friendly because they know how close this franchise truly is. And if it leads to them making a big splash and a big impact, especially on the defensive side of the ball, you're going to see a couple of players be willing to do that. That's the other part kind of free agency that you really want to watch for. It's not always about who the Bucs themselves are signing, but what are other teams paying players that are on the same level or within the same tier as the players that the Bucs are pursuing. Now, for those of you that remember the dark ages, back when the Bucs were giving out just tons of money to guys like Carl Nix, who, thanks a lot, Shiano. He barely played for the Bucs, but he was a major signing at the time. Alteron Werner, Deshaun Goldson, Darrelle Revis, even Vincent Jackson. The Bucs had to severely overpay players just to get them to come to Tampa because the team was terrible. So teams like the Bears, the Titans, the Jaguars, the Jets, the Giants, they're going to have to pay a premium basically because they suck. They have to give these players a reason to choose them over some of the other teams in the NFL. And the only reason that they can give, you can sell the whole, we're trying to build something special and you're going to be a major building block in that. And you're going to be a focal point and we're going to build around you and yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, players want, we'll say 3 things. I was going to say 2. We're going to say 3. They want long-term security. They want to get paid. They want their money. The NFL stands for not for long. So you need to cash in when you have the chance. That's why, again, I said this way early in the offseason. I will never bash a player on this show for taking more money to go somewhere else because it is so difficult to get that kind of paycheck a second time. So when players have the opportunity to get their bag, I'm 100% behind you. I have left countless jobs for a better financial opportunity for myself and my family. NFL is no different. The NBA is no different. The NHL is no different. Professional sports are no different than your job or my job. If we have the opportunity to change our jobs for better financial security for us and our families, we do it. There are also sometimes other factors, but that's the main factor. And then the third thing is they want to compete for championships. So if you're a team that's out there that cannot offer them the opportunity to compete for a championship in the next 2 to 3 years or over the course of their contract, you better make up for it with one of those other things. And that's going to be the money. Teams like the Bucs, the Commanders, the Ravens, the Bills, the Lions, the Packers, they don't have to pay that premium. They don't have to essentially bribe a player to come play for them with more money than other teams are offering strictly because they have no other choice. Players are going to come to those teams for a fair market value, but they're going to come to those teams knowing that they have a chance to compete in the postseason. So take a look at the positions and the level of players that are being signed. Take a look at the status of the teams signing them. And that's when you're going to start to be able to piece together what certain players are going to cost the Buccaneers throughout the free agent frenzy. Final mailbag question, and it has absolutely nothing at all to do with the Buccaneers, but I'm going to entertain it because why the heck not? You know, I do these mailbags. A lot of you send in Buccaneers questions, but feel free to do an Ask Me Anything. If you have a question about me or my interest or whatever, go ahead and ask. You know, sometimes I'll answer them, sometimes I won't. But Insider Ricky asks, who is your favorite current wrestler and what's your prediction for the Jey Uso versus Gunther match? So I don't really watch wrestling much. I'll tune in for the big events, the pay-per-views, even though they don't call them that anymore. I don't know what they call them. But like the Royal Rumble, the Elimination Chamber, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, like that kind of stuff, I'll tune in. I'll check it out if there's something that piques my interest. But I don't really watch the weekly stuff. My favorite always has been and always will be The Rock. Good guy, bad guy, I don't care. He's awesome. And I like him better as a bad guy because he's funnier. He's more entertaining when he's a heel. And then I've always been a big fan of Randy Orton and CM Punk. So I was really glad to see that Orton returned at Elimination Chamber. I'm looking forward to seeing him at WrestleMania. So I would say as far as regulars, it's Orton when he's not injured. You know, he's had quite a few injuries over the course of the last couple of years. And then whoever's facing Cody Rhodes. I absolutely cannot stand that dude. He's not very good, in my opinion. You know, he was buried in mid cards for most of his career. He leaves, he comes back, and all of a sudden he's shoved down our throats as, you know, this wonderful all-world kind of guy. Like, no, I can't stand him. I want him to lose all the time. As far as Jey versus Gunther, I think Jey wins. That's just kind of how it usually goes. The Rumble winner is going to win the title at WrestleMania. But my best friend's son, Evan, for those of you that follow me on Twitter, you know that I've shared some posts about that. Evan is my best friend's son who is recovering from his second heart transplant. Our little warrior. I love that little boy so much. And he's doing fantastic. He really, really is. This is going so much better than the first transplant where he was fighting infections and he was in the hospital for just, you know, what seemed like eternity. That child has spent more time in hospitals than he has in his own home. Right now, he's at the Ronald McDonald House. He's allowed to go out and do things. He went to the Raw in Cincinnati. I think it was, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. Shortly after the Rumble, leading up to Elimination Chamber. I can't remember the exact timeline, but he got to go to that. He gets to go to the Newport Aquarium, which is one of the best aquariums in the nation. So his favorite wrestler is Jey Uso. So I'm going to root extra hard for him just because I know how happy it will make Evan. And also a dear thank you to all of you who saw the stuff that I put on Twitter about Evan, that retweeted it, that shared it, that sent your thoughts, your prayers. I appreciate you all so much. You know, I refer to him as my best friend, but he's the closest thing I've ever had to a brother. We have been best friends for 3 decades, and I love him dearly. I love his family. I love, you know, his son, and to see him doing this well, all those prayers and everything, they meant the world to me. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart. I love all of you for that. That is going to do it for this episode. If there's major news over the weekend, we might be dropping a bonus show. It might be a live show. It's all going to depend on timing. My son has his end of season hockey party with his teammates, so I'm going to be gone most of Sunday. But if big things break over the course of the next couple of days, I will do my best to get a bonus episode out to you as quickly and efficiently as possible. But on Monday, we will have some sort of mock draft Monday, but then there's going to be plenty of reaction to the open negotiating window beginning on Monday. There's going to be free agent news coming in. And then I do have a couple of draft-related mailbag questions. In the meantime, please check out everything going on Twitter, at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure that you are subscribed or following on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. If I'm going live with free agent reaction, you want that notification on so you can be like, okay, James is going live right now. We might have something serious brewing here. So make sure you turn those notifications on. And then, of course, become a Locked On Bucs insider. Those insiders are going to know before anyone when I am going live. You can do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or clicking the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day, an outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.